Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. I think we are back, Theo. Every week is
Yes,
becoming our date.
we
It's
are.
kind
We are back this week. We are having fun actually. So I'm very. I really like this new rhythm that we are picking up. So is we are doing shows after shows. Seems very. We are rolling. We are into it. So very happy about. All the things that we're going to talk today. Today we're going to talk about serverless, really, which is
yeah,
probably one of the um, I don't know, one of the things that I like the most or dislike the most at the same time. Probably it's a great idea, but yeah, we'll
yeah,
talk
and
about
it's
it.
it's controversial. It's like, you know, edgy. That's why we like it. Yeah, we don't like standard stuff. So, um, I give like a minute for everyone to settle down more, so we can probably um, do the usual kind of like recap of last time. We chatted about Kubernetes and Node. So we
Yeah,
went in the world of like real hardcore, infrastructure orchestration. And now today we talk about something that fluctuates in the ether, that doesn't exist. It's serverless. It's the how to run software not on servers. So that's kind of like,
of
I don't
course,
know.
servers do not exist. Come on.
So uh, I don't know. Let's maybe do a kind of like a historical recap for everyone because I don't know. I personally generally love always those kind of like history ground setting. That is, serverless came in the explosion in the peak clearly of microservices and the whole transformation, cloud. Scaling, all these kind of like buzzwords coming all together, and they kind of like did this um, reaction, and so that's serverless. And now, I kind of like I kind of go a little bit. I start to put some pepper on uh, on our pasta. That is the Italian way of saying some spice on things. Um, I was kind of like on my LinkedIn, and I saw a plethora of posts about serverless AI, open serverless and AI, and all those kind coming together. And I was like, okay, interesting. But I mean, I think I want you to um uh, kind of like I want to kind of kickstart Theo with a little bit of like more knowledge on let's do serverless and Node, right? Because I think those two things are
Let's talk about serverless first, and then and serverless and Node. What serverless great at? Okay, the origin of serverless, I would say. Okay, and then we talk about everything that follows from there. Okay, so despite a lot of people saying otherwise, okay, the first serverless provider, or in other terms, the first system where you can upload a function and that function would run for you, okay, was not AWS. It was CouchDB. And you remember those years, Luca?
even before, right? The time of Heroku,
Yeah, but no,
right?
no, no. Heroku was Git push. The things were actually running with processes. You can control all the things.
Well,
Okay,
the containerization was not
was
so
not
far
there.
from
Was not there. Okay, this is all of this is before containers existed. Okay, this is like the starting point of all the bits. So Heroku is part of the discussion because Heroku gave that nice fuzzy feeling of git push to deploy, which everybody wanted. Still today, everybody wanted the
everyone copied.
everybody copied, but still want the developer experience of git push to deploy that Heroku had those days. That was
Let's say
absolutely magical.
But let's draw a line, right? Developers, because the enterprise, as we know, has different
Yeah,
requirements.
yeah,
So
yeah. But
developers love Git push,
yeah,
the
yeah.
enterprise. But similar thing, right? One thing that does everything and is pushed somewhere and it runs.
Yes. So this is the flow. Okay. Now, um, AWS came along and released AWS Lambda as a way to script their cloud, essentially, to interconnect systems together. Okay. And it's great, works fantastic. It's one of the best technologies that, most revolutionizing technologies that have of the last few years. As all the technologies that been they get used in all sorts of ways, and some of those are genius, some of those are, well, less genius. Let's put it that way. Okay. So let's take a look at the premise of Lambda. Okay. Lambda wants to do first, it allows a scale to zero. This is a fundamental bit. I have no traffic, so I have complete elasticity. So I have no fixed costs. My system is not running by default. Okay. I pay nothing. And in the span of, I don't know, a few milliseconds, few hundred milliseconds, my system is running and it's executing code. When it processes one request at a time. This is the critical part. It processes one thing and it ends. Okay? This is the most important bit that you need to remember about AWS Lambda. Okay? As all system with massive scalability, okay, if you've thought about all of this, okay, when you start up a new process and do processing and so on and so forth, there is a cost, okay, in doing so. Cost in memory, cost in startup time, all the things like that. And that cost is paid for every request, everything that you process in Lambda, one at a time. Okay? And even worse, okay? Lambda charges you from the moment the process starts, so it allocates memory, it uses memory, to the moment that the process ends. Okay, the processing ends and it suspends the process and it stops using memory. So once you're using physical resources, it's billing you money. Now, if you are using Lambda to do any I/O, okay, meaning a fetch request or a calling a database or doing anything that is not using the CPU, you are basically paying money for it to be idle and sitting there doing absolutely nothing, which I find abysmal, frankly. And at that point, Lambda is it's still fine, like it's still a phenomenal technology, because the moment you need to interconnect two systems one with another and you want to throw something together very quickly and it does not get a lot of traffic, it's one of the most beautiful things, because you can put it out there, works, you don't have to worry about scaling and so on and so forth. Once it reaches a certain level, probably start being a certain throughput, a certain number of invocations, stop being the right tool for the job. And I have a few other stories to tell about this, and I will tell you in a moment, because it's worth telling these stories, because this is where Lambda said, why would I use this thing? Okay,
Yeah,
so
but
yeah.
on one side, Lambda kind of like also came in a moment where the actor model was the architecture to use, right? Everything event based. So kind of like outside of, I think, the infrastructural pattern, there's also kind of like an advantage in having kind of like a system that is designed to be event based. So kind of like if you're doing, for example, like you were saying, a small interconnection, you're stateless, it's kind of interesting, but especially is the glue code between the different services, having, in this case, AWS having SNS as their transport. It's kind of like interesting, but I I mean, but let's go a little bit deeper because I don't know if anybody knows exactly what serverless and Lambda. I mean, we are not picking on Lambda. This is serverless in general, but Lambda is the most kind of like well-known. AWS has been extremely transparent in sharing with everyone how their Lambda system is built, so kudos to them. And I think 99% of the serverless so-called provider in the world, they're using the technology that Amazon anyhow invented, that is Firecracker. So that's, I mean, we can name them Fly.io. We know for sure of many others that are extremely well known that are using it. So everyone is behind having. But let's explain a little bit the model because I think serverless. What is interesting to the segue I would like to take is to go into the different flavors of like serverless that we are seeing, right? Because there's serverless and serverless. But I mean, what is behind serverless? Because let's reveal the first big secret of serverless. Is there a server or not?
There are servers.
And so how are these functions running?
I don't do. For this show, Luca, we should have got a hat and a rabbit, and we start pulling out the rabbit from the hat all the time. Okay.
Yeah, but the secret, the first part is cool, right? Because they what we do, we took the idea of microkernels, extended to isolated micro VM, and so on, right?
Okay, so the hardest thing to note that if you want to have a server in which you run multiple people, different software, okay, the hardest thing to do for that is security. How do I ensure that my data is secure? Okay, the execution of my execution is secure and I cannot access Luca executions. Okay, how can I do that? Okay, that's the first important thing. Okay, now this is done by AWS in what they release as open source, which is fantastic. Okay, thank you. This is one of the greatest things that you have donated to the world, to all the people, including me, that complains to some extent that AWS does not do a lot of open source. They release Firecracker as open source, allowing a lot of the container community to keep working on this in the open. Is fantastic. Okay, this technology called Firecracker that allows to spin up a micro VM, they call it, which is essentially a VM without a kernel. I would say something like that, to isolate completely a process with another. Okay. So they can be completely isolated and completely controlled on the network, on the process, on the resources that they use, and everything can be measured correctly. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect, okay, to be honest. It's hard to use, a lot hard to set up, requires a few critical things on the hardware side to correctly run all the hypervisor things, but it's phenomenal, okay, really phenomenal.
But it's a single instance. So Firecracker is a single isolated micro VM.
It's a single isolated micro VM, yes.
So you need something else to build serverless, right?
Oh, of course, Luca. So how does the serverless model work? Well, the serverless model works by having essentially a scheduler of those requests. So all those instances, when they are active, they go and do an HTTP request calling an endpoint, asking, is there a request, an invocation for me that I need to execute? Then, once there is, they process it and they return back. That's what they do all the time. So they've inverted the request response model into a pull model, essentially.
Well, I mean, if you look in a macroscopic way, serverless is nothing more than having this humongous hardware resource where your functions are basically functions that are running in threads, and you do basically process interop between your HTTP ingress, call it whatever you want, and your function. Like, it's not actually new technology. And also Firecracker for everyone. I mean, it's just like
C groups.
in BSD you had jails that kind of
Yeah,
like did not the same thing because it's not a micro VM. The isolation is kind of like pretty strong also there. And there was actually a question that is interesting about step functions.
No, there was one
Because
before, Luca. Why is it so bad to pay for the time Lambda waits for a request to complete
against a traditional server, but
against a traditional server?
is the
Yes.
unit of economics, and the fact that the traditional server is a depreciable asset for me,
Well, it's
while
different. It's
Lambda not.
different. It's different. Okay. So the first bit is so with Lambda, a request comes in, it waits for the processing. Okay. However, this is fantastic. Okay. But if you have a server, okay, that hardware resource can process more than one request at a time. Okay. Even if you're using Node, you can do it on the same thread. If you're using any system with event loop technology, it can run it on the same thread. Okay. But if you are using, I don't know, a system without an event loop based technology, in it, you can use threads to do the same and greatly allow multiple concurrent execution on your system while one is waiting. With Lambda, you can't. It's not possible. So you are not paying for that time. You are paying, yes, for that time on a traditional server, but you are not, you can use it. On Lambda, you're just paying it and do nothing with it.
Yeah, and also the fact that, like you just said, the server is something that as a size and dimension these are completely different, right? So I can do many other things while even if that one was hanging, I could do many other things.
Yes.
The thing that I think is interesting oh, and then sorry, we forgot
The
about the
step
step
function,
function.
the step functions. Yes. You want to take that, Luca? You're
So step functions and Lambda are two things that they look very similar, but they're actually in two diametrically opposite quadrant of the spectrum because step functions consider state, so it's a state machine, while Lambda itself is purely ephemeral. It doesn't maintain state, and ergo is kind of like completely different. Step functions, they are useful when you need to actually process operations in sequence with a non-deterministic time frame and non-deterministic next step. The alternative is simple workflow engine in AWS if you want to use the same cloud provider for what they are called long-running processing transactions. So when you need to basically process, for example, something that has a length that is days, months, years, whatever, is this kind of extremely long transaction. Just to kind of like have something, not talking about AWS, but if you think an alternative to simple workflow engine and kind of like to an extension step function is Cadence for doing state orchestration. So they're different. And to be very honest, step functions are very appealing because you have a nice UI, but I don't know. I used them in the past, and I don't think I'm going to use it anymore. I don't know if our friend Luca is listening, but probably is gonna feel like a stab. But I mean, that's my own opinion. I think Lambda is great to do certain things. Simple workflow engine is great for doing other things. Step function is that in between product. Um, oh, somebody says that the first serverless was Google App Engine in 2008.
I have a feeling that CouchDB was predated that. I have it's 2005 roughly. I don't know when the JavaScript things were added, but I have on good words that it was on those times.
Also, App Engine follows a different philosophy. It's not the serverless philosophy.
Yeah, no.
So it's different kind of like serverless. Probably we should also say that when we talk about serverless, we talk most likely of the interface that you can find in Lambda or in
Functions.
Cloud
Function.
Runs. Exactly, function. That's actually the normal association because have you ever, Theo, been in the conversation function as a service versus serverless?
Oh, this is nice. Yeah, I have, but let's
Because I
focus
can
on
have a
let.
serverless, I can have a serverless database,
Yeah,
right? But I can I like Aurora,
yeah.
but can I have so why
So there
everyone
is
says
one
serverless
thing
step
about
function?
there is a one thing about step functions. Okay, step
Mm?
functions runs and then they wait for some state to happen in between, some state change to happen in between. Now
Yeah,
the
it's a state
prob
machine.
it's a state machine, yes, but the problem is that you still wait. If one of those lambda needs to do a database call, you're still waiting for it. So
Yeah.
that's not a solution for the problem that I was mentioning. Okay, that's the bit that I was.
The idle time is okay. I mean, but it's kind of like neglectable to, in my opinion. What is the processing time that is the
Yes,
hardest piece. Um, the question: can I run actually multi-threading in Lambda?
you can, but it's tied to that single request coming in. So
Exactly.
does it make any sense? Well, yes, it does. In the sense, yes, it could do if you want to, take your lambdas to your limits and do all sort of impossible things with them. It's possible that you can actually do it. In fact, I did it, okay, for doing some very, very expensive CPU intensive processing. So that had some lot of disk IO and stuff like that to do. Yeah, it's possible, but you know, if most people will not do much with it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. That's a question that it makes me smile. That is misleading. It seems misleading to talk of Lambda as costing you while doing nothing, waiting a DB query, without advocating the benefits of scaling to zero. I,
Okay, no,
I
I've started to the starting point. Okay, if you're worried about scaling to zero, okay, you have no traffic. We are completely talking about two different things here. Okay. Um, so you have your you scale to zero, okay? You have no traffic, okay? It's a phenomenal technology. Use it all the single time, okay? However, if you are worried about if you start having a lot of traffic, okay, it's problematic. You want servers, okay, because they're way more cost effective. To be like, there was this article that I couldn't find recently, but there was this article that showed that there was EC2 EC2 costed this amount of money. If we wanted to add Fargate and ECS, it was like double that. And then the same load on Lambda was another double from Fargate, something like that. And the more traffic you add, the biggest these become. It was really, really, really bad. And yeah, but it's if you scale to zero, it's fantastic. Okay, like if your problem is I have a job that spikes to, I don't know, I need to run a lot of it, 1 hour a day and then nothing. This is beautiful. Okay, to do it in Lambda.
Yeah, I mean, I sought a couple of questions, but I kind of in years of experience of using even AWS since its inception, basically. Um, I generally encounter only 2 or 3 use cases where the choice was undeniably right to use Lambda. And they were mostly cron job, like generally speaking, cron job that they needed to scale on a massive scale. Like we're talking about like million of records to process, right? But that was it. I was in a meeting, yeah, where there was this conversation and everyone was advocating for scaling to zero, and it was an e-commerce. You know, what kind of like the executive said, right? If we scale to zero means we don't have traffic, we have a problem as an e-commerce. We should work 24/7. That's what we are providing to our customers. So it really depends by the use case, right? But scaling to zero is the solution, I think, for cron jobs. Like if they would have called it cron at scale, it was phenomenal. And somebody is asking about step function. So step function in the use case that is described is for processing that they require a long waiting time in between steps, manual step and confirmation, or a long running payload processing in the background. Yeah, they're called workflows. And they treat what is called a stateful long running transaction. So where is non-deterministic when the next step is going to be invoked. Sorry. The thing that I is another great use case when you have, for example, I remember doing this for a big customer. You need to have some sort of like internal or external tooling that requires multiple step validation, or that require, like it was said, manual approval. And somebody is asking, so instead of step function, what would you use instead? I mean, I generally think that okay, let's take a step back. Uber already foresaw this problem a long time ago, and they reimagine how you interact with Uber as this infinite transaction that starts when you register and ends when you get out of the platform, not when you finish your ride. It's this long-running mutation of your state. And they build a tool that they open source called Cadence. So for the people that want to use the open source, it's called Cadence. It's an extremely complicated tool to use, but it represents this ideal state of a workflow. There is a company called Temporal, extremely successful, and they figured that the key of this principle is doing orchestration. So a workflow is nothing more than orchestration. Now, it depends really by the use case. If I need to build something that requires durability and consistency and so on, I probably use something like Temporal or Cadence. But I don't know. I find it that Simple Workflow Engine is great, in my opinion. It's a beautiful tool that was inspiration for Cadence. But for me, step function is a little bit I don't know. It promises a lot, and it does actually what I can fundamentally do myself in a very simple way. DynamoDB, Lambda, SNS, and you can build phenomenal things. Or you can build S3 if you want a storage, and you have way more control over the whole flow. You're not tightly coupled to a specific single tool. I don't know. I personally feel that using primitives is way better in the cloud, but I might be completely wrong. But we were talking about serverless, and then we got derailed like we usually do, and we are at the half an hour mark, and I really want to come at the end answering the question to server or not to server. This is the question. Shakespeare would actually agree with that, probably. But so we talk about the VM, the micro VM isolation.
Yes, and
right?
then it pulls the message. It pulls a Lambda. Okay, pulls a job, execute it, then returns the result back, and it pulls the micro VM. Like the micro VM is paused, completely frozen in place.
Okay, but hold on a second. I'm old enough. We are the same age.
Unfortunately, Luca, time is passing for everybody. Beard is getting gray.
That's why I shift. I remember the ESB, the Enterprise Service Bus, the one that they sold in the 80s when you and I were just born. And it's still there. I believe it. In any enterprise, there is one hidden. But it was doing the same thing. It was an MQ. It was a JMSQ. I'm talking about Java, right? uh, and then you invoke all these jar or functions, and this enterprise service bus keeps the state. Isn't it the same stuff? In .NET you use bitstock, for example. But why? I mean, it didn't scale to zero, but luckily these businesses, they needed to be always up and running. And by the way, I just want to we need to say, Theo, because it's probably from 2016 that we are saying the same thing. I know that everyone thinks that banks don't work during the night, but actually they do. I know. You and I interviewed so many people asking this question, and everyone was like, so reconciliation is one of the things where you could potentially use Lambda for, but it's such a long and intense process that probably it's better to run it on a server. But like anything that we think is going offline and online is scaled to zero, banks actually they don't scale to zero. They continuously process because they have a massive amount of reconciliation needs to be done.
Maybe there are a couple of hours during the night that they're idle, Luca. I have a.
Yeah, when they tell you that there is the maintenance window, it's probably when they're updating the operating system.
There is probably like I don't know, maybe a couple of hours when they are idle, but yeah, not
But
much.
I just want to kind of like I might kind of derail, but I just said about banks, and this morning, for everyone, I'm in Canada, so if I say something Canadian, pardon me, but there is a bank, an online bank called Tangerine that I'm using sporadically, and I needed to cancel a transaction, which you expect to be something uh, always online. Well, actually, I was trying to cancel that transaction. And they said this functionality is not available right now. So I know I'm gonna troll you and joke, but do you think they were running Lambda? They were warming up the function to delete my transaction, uh, or something went really wrong? So that's the kind of like thing. But back to our beautiful. Oh, look. I mean, I wish I could show it, but they say, we are sorry for the inconvenience. This function is currently unavailable. Please try later again. I was laughing because I said, I hope they're not using function as a service to delete my transaction. But my point is back to the point of how serverless kind of like works, right? Because I really want to answer to that question. And I think you are the right person to reveal the secret in Node, why Node and serverless, they can go well or bad, and you will tell us. But back to serverless. So basically, we have this micro VM. They are invoked. They are parked. They are disposed. So basically, there are these micro VM that they continuously go on and off, on and off, on and off, and they load the bundle and they run basically that function, right? Basically, in a nutshell. And then there is something that invokes them through a request queue. Cool. But you confirm that there is still a server behind the scene, right?
Well, of course.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure that when I send this
Well,
function, it
it is
doesn't
the
go in the
point.
ether.
It is the point. It's a server, okay? Because at some point somebody has bought it,
Hmm.
okay? Has put them in their books, and they are amortizing it every year. If that didn't exist, if the tax reason did not exist, like this is a business, okay? I buy shit and then the stuff and then I'm renting it out for people to use. That's the
So
business, okay?
basically, there is capex for who owns the server, but for who uses serverless is all opex, so it's all a cost.
Exactly.
In
It's
a
all a
nutshell. Okay,
cost, exactly.
and just like for me,
And
the
as
other
DHH says, it's better to have capex, but this is what DHH says.
always right, but no, it's not DHA. They are every CFO in the world. I invite everyone in this call that are listening to us, and probably that they think we're nuts, but go to your CFO and say, I decide to move everything to OPEX. I would challenge everyone to try because the economy speaks louder than technology, right? Technology is controlled by the economy. And a very interesting thing also too, that you and I have been facing, and you and I had the fortune to and the freedom in our past to experiment with many things. And Um, but I kind of like want to go back for a second to server versus serverless, right? Because I need to say, this week I woke up one morning and I heard that there is something new, and I was like, okay, what is that? And they call it fluid compute. So it's the server that doesn't know if it's a server or not, I think.
It's amazing.
But
Okay, let me go back. Okay, it's a phenomenal idea. Okay, I can explain to you in 5 words, probably, if you want or
explain
not.
everyone because I have my own opinion on that. But I want
No, no,
that you tell to everyone.
I look. It's a genius idea. Okay, I have this system that receives a message. Okay, and then returns a result. And while it's doing that thing, okay, that's doing that cycle, it keeps the process alive, and when it returns, it shuts down the process. Okay, so what the brilliant engineers of Vercel have created is a way to essentially completely avoid the incoming request. So the incoming request that they schedule on a Lambda is just to spin up the Firecracker micro VM and so on. Okay, and they keep that alive for a long time. And then in that system, they use a completely parallel scheduler to actually schedule the execution of your requests. It's brilliant, frankly. It's completely sidestepping all the Lambda or how Lambda works for their own use case. It's a great thing. It tries to overcome the limits of Lambda. Okay, and it creates a lot of complexity on top instead of fixing it. So I, you know, to me, it's a brilliant technology. It feels like the old school Great Ape, and from time to time, Great Ape is amazing, but it seems like Great Ape.
Yeah, to me it feels. The more I think about serverless, to be honest, and here I say something provocative. Um, you remember when you were a younger kid, and we have both young kids, so we are in that phase where you tell them about Santa, right? And then you need to tell them the Santa doesn't exist, right? If they don't figure it out by themselves. Um, I personally did figure it out by myself, but the 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 thing is, it's a story that we tell, and then there is the moment of illusion, disillusion of like in reality. And I always say, and I love actually to say when I was talking with when my wife and I were talking about shall we tell the story, I said, well, I then need to tell them that it was created by Coca-Cola to make Coca-Cola richer. I mean, that's the truth, right? And so to me sounds serverless. I think the idea that was brought in by AWS was genius. Like it was probably the most was one of the biggest let's say shakes that we got in the technology landscape. Werner Vogels was like genius with this idea in bringing it out and how the system looked like. On the opposite side, I think what we saw is that a lot of people they invented their own flavor of serverless over and over again, and that's back to your point. What I feel is that we stopped the evolution at a certain point, and we just built on top more and more and more and more complexity and facades to hide the real problem, as it is to fix the execution model behind the scene, which was perfectly fitting for certain use cases. Like I said, you and I both enjoyed the Lambda I sent you to find when the MacBook Pro was available for ordering. And it's genius, right? Because it's like a cron job and it works brilliantly. It's easy to deploy. You don't have to care about it. And so, but I think then the term serverless was the problem. The problem with serverless for me is the semantic of calling it serverless or function as a service, or it's kind of like the association between the two things. That's why I was provoking and say, but function as a service or serverless, which one do I need to use? Because I can have a serverless database, apparently, but then I have function as a service, and then it's kind of getting a little bit confusing, at least to me. I don't know for you, Theo.
Ah,
And by the way, I love Coca-Cola. Don't get me wrong.
so
But
for me, I think so. AWS Lambda was born to get something amazing done. Okay, it works so well, but and to connect things internally. Okay, and they built it originally for Python. I have a feeling. Okay, because they are a Python shop for a lot of things. Okay.
no, Java. There are plenty of Java.
Yeah,
AWS
yeah,
is
but
Java.
yes, but they build like for scripting with Python
Yeah.
the system. Okay. Then they realized that JavaScript was eating the world, and they bolted it Node.js on top.
Which is fine.
Which is fine. Okay. However, Node.js is
Cloudflare
built.
did the same, by the way.
Yeah. Node.js is built to run multiple requests at the same time, to run multiple I/O in parallel, because it has an event loop. Okay. It's built for that. And by using it in Lambda, you're literally taking it and putting it in a jail and saying, okay, you're not doing that anymore.
But Theo, sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. But isn't the event loop similar to what we talked earlier on of that queue, the send request to somebody that can pick them up and then returns and send it back?
Yeah, very
Isn't
similar.
it like
yes.
a behind the queue, right?
Yeah.
So we could say that I say something absurd, right? But it's similar to an old 1980 system would work with an ESB. Let's keep it like very absurd.
No, I would not like that. I would not put it like that. It's more close to how Windows SharePoint 11 works behind the scene. I don't know if you've studied that system. It's brilliant, Luca. Now, this tells how old I am, so this is probably a very bad idea to share. But it's brilliant. Okay, it has an event pump. Okay, and the event you see on the screen get directed to one application or the other in the windows that are displayed. Okay, and the system behind the scene collects all this data and then re-render the screen based on the input of those. It's fantastic. Okay. It's a fantastic design, completely unsafe, of course, but it's a fantastic design. Okay. Before we go, Luca, there was a question on before.
I didn't see it.
Okay.
I didn't see it.
There was a question. So the first question was our WebSocket coupling with serverless. Our WebSocket is couples with serverless, and what is your choice to scale it? No. It can't work, okay? So the problem is that WebSocket is a persistent connection, okay? So it means that in order to have a WebSocket, and we know because we've just done, I spent a week dealing with one of our customers with their WebSocket system, okay? Basically, it's a live connection. So it means that it's stateful. So it means that there is a connection, which is a socket, a TCP socket, running from my end server up through several probably proxy, reverse proxy, but uninterrupted. So this flow chain is never interrupted down to the end user, okay? And it creates this very nice tunnel on which everything data flows through. Brilliant. Okay. This model is completely antithetical with serverless because, especially with Lambda, okay, other implementation can deal with it because they can run multiple queries that the things are requested at the same time and so on. But with Lambda, you are only executing one function at a time, okay, and then ending. So with WebSocket, it means that either I would stay forever on that socket, okay, and keep paying for it even if it has no activity, or what they implemented in order to receive WebSockets is an addition to what they call the API gateway that essentially keep the socket open, and then whenever there is a message incoming, they call a Lambda for every message on the WebSocket for you to process, and there are endpoints to send the messages down to that Lambda. works well. It's hell of expensive if you move a lot of data through, but it works very well. So on the concept of AWS and so on and so forth, I would like to say that the Lambda system is super robust. So what I would choose Lambda for also is because AWS never breaks, never removes any API, never removes anything almost. Okay, I generically I tend to prefer using Lambda system when I know that there will be very low maintenance down the road, possibly zero. So it's done there, it's deployed, okay, it's working, and if it's working today, it's very likely it will keep working forever, okay, which is something that cannot be said to other technologies. So this is actually great. This is actually a great plus.
You know, the more I so open and close bracket. There is a trick also if you want to run socket on a cheaper price because DynamoDB has subscriptions that are exponentially cheaper. So you could theoretically do the trick of like bouncing back the subscription to your Dynamo and listen to the changes there, but it's exponentially more complicated to do. But one thing that is, I think, super cool is that by the questions that we are receiving in our conversation, I'm getting more and more the feeling that the technology itself has a great essence to exist for certain use cases where servers are like a huge waste of energy in all meanings. The other thing that is kind of like pretty interesting is that it seems that what people are looking for is that operationless experience. That kind of like I don't want to kind of like I don't want to care about scaling because scaling is a concern of developers. Don't ask me why, but it seems to be. And the other one is like almost forcing a certain kind of like architecture in people's mind. More kind of like I think people they confuse functional programming with functional architecture with function-based architecture, but that's my opinion. I don't know. What do you think? I just feel that where this serverless versus server, to server or not to server, this is the question, goes to the point of like it's not a matter of the server, it's a matter of simplicity on one side. Developers don't want to care about certain things. And on the other one is that they feel that they need to care because they lack on the other side probably the support to not care. Like, I don't know. What do you think? I'm very provocative. You know my opinion on all this thing. I
So
love infrastructure. So
the point, frankly, it really depends on the application. Okay, you cannot do anything without knowing your use case, your business. It's very hard to make a choice. Okay, because you have to. Okay, you have to make that choice. Okay, you have to make that decision based on the non-functional requirement of your system. Otherwise, it makes no sense. Okay, so
but don't you think? Sorry, don't you think that serverless? Sorry if I interrupt you. I feel that actually what you said is partially right because isn't it serverless removing that cognitive, let's say, uh, overhead? Because you basically say I put a function, then because it's serverless, it will take the infrastructure will take care of itself.
yes, yeah, you know the best serverless function that I wrote? I copy and pasted it on a production environment during a crisis in the editor that they have. It deploy.
Yeah. So you didn't care of. You just said I need this functionality to happen, right?
Yes.
So, but why do we make it so? Why did we need to create this serverless when I think and it's becoming concerns of developers? Why isn't it or the concern of the runtime Like, because we spoke about Node, right?
Yeah, but it's all of
But
them.
shouldn't the server itself then in 2025, or am I in the wrong year, take care of itself? Like, I deploy something, and this server should just make the right decision for myself.
Yep.
Why do I need to instrument something that fundamentally has no soul? So my other question to you, so this fluid compute is not such a terrible idea.
No, it's a great idea. I just wish that AWS gave us a way to an API for Firecracker that was better than using Lambda. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great? Something that scaled to 0, but it actually gives us actual servers. Come on, that would be fantastic.
But you could theoretically, I mean, Fargate doesn't go there, but you could theoretically.
Yeah, it doesn't go there. That's the point.
But I think there is another problem to me. I think the issue is purely financial. Like, it's not. I don't know. I don't want to make it like the
I
the,
want to
the,
tell
the
a story
financial forum.
before we part. I want to tell a story, Luca. Okay,
Go.
and serverless is problematic. Okay, because well, let's say AWS Lambda at least. Okay, but serverless in general, the way serverless is conceived. Okay, it's very often it has limits. Okay, on how many functions you can schedule. Okay, and if you are doing it for doing queue processing, okay, you always have the retries. And you can also tell, okay, configure how long an execution can time out. Okay. Now somebody can put the maximum timeout on an execution because they need to run something for a long time. That's totally fine. Okay. And then they put a lot of message on a queue. Okay. Also fine, right? With a retry, also fine. So, however, let's say, okay, that they have 10,000 messages to process, okay, on a queue with a retry, okay? Now, what will happen is that the Lambda run, and they don't put a cap on how many of those Lambdas can be spawned, okay? So, in a matter of minutes, the cloud will spin up so many instances of that, and if they all time out, maybe because a database is slow or it has a problem, they exhaust the limit of your lambdas. And the limit, in AWS at least, is at account level. Now, this was one lambda. What if there was another lambda trying to get the executions? It can't, because the pool has been exhausted. And now, an incident on one part of your system that you thought was unbreakable because you use Lambda brought down a completely irrelevant part of the system that the only thing they had in common was Lambda.
Well,
And
because behind the scene there is a server.
Because behind the scene there are servers, okay, physical resources that are rented and executed. So,
But Theo, we forgot one thing. It's 5 minutes to the end.
come
And
on.
we had a tradition to find a topic for next time, and there are so many. But I want to ask anybody listening, still listening, that
Or
we
watching the
would
recording, guys. So
or
write in the
watching the
comments
recording,
down there.
to please suggest the topic we would like to pick up next Wednesday. But we have 5 minutes. I just want to kind of like say one thing. But by the way, we spoke about Lambda, but guys, basically any serverless. I also said open serverless in the beginning and so on. It's just like the same thing. What is kind of interesting, and I was starting the thought is, it's a purely, like I said, I, if you look at serverless in general or functions, they are phenomenal technology. But at the same time, we spoke about this fluid, um, kind of like compute. And I think what is kind of like interesting. Oh, by the way, I think Riverside is crashing on my camera. So if you see all black, don't worry, I'm still alive.
It's all
But
black, Luca.
I cannot do anything though because it's literally the software. Um, I can try to do something. But what I was saying is purely kind of like on the financial side, right? And we said that if on one side the serverless makes it easier for developers to kind of like you know uh, operate. On the other side, it has another problem that I think we haven't been able to build a system that theoretically can hide the operational complexity and all the decision bias of this of how to run those kind of like applications. So we spoke last time about Kubernetes, but I'm back. Technology. But what I was saying that last time we spoke about Kubernetes, what I kind of like would like that you and I one day should jam is the future of this intersection. Can Kubernetes one day become the new serverless world for enterprise developers? Because the reality is that it doesn't run on your server, so you cannot capex it. So is there a way we can there is a future for enterprise systems to kind of like provide the same advantages as serverless as developer experience to developers? That's my kind of like question, because fluid is nice, and serverless is extremely appealing. Servers are boring most of the time, but they all hide the need of these large organizations. So probably that's the question that we should one day answer, or you and I should jam in one of our sessions. Um, yeah, today was mostly kind of like a chit chat and very kind of like I would say, no, I don't want to say political, but more kind of like opinionated. And I think you know we love technology, right? We don't discriminate for anything that is technology wise. We love it. We jam on it, but we also want to criticize it to find better ways to improve it. Like you were saying, like we wish that serverless would grow into an evolution, but it feels that it's in a stale position right now. Um, is there any other question on the people live or
No, I
something that
don't
Theo
think
you
so,
want to
Luca.
say?
And we are at time, so I think we call it a day and see you next week
See you next Wednesday, but don't forget
to tell
to
us.
suggest the topic that we should talk about. Until then, I wish you a great rest of the week and see you next Wednesday.